Hello, everybody. Welcome to What Would Your Ideal World Be? A new podcast which examines many important people and the important things in their lives, what they think about most current trends at the moment, what they think about certain subject matters, and of course, what their ideal world would be. As part of the special series of episodes we're having, looking at the London mayor elections 2021, today's guest will be Farah London, a major entrepreneur who has had a hand in many companies over the years, including being the founder and current CEO of Back to Business Joint International Trade Networking. She's running for the position of London Mayor as an independent candidate and used to be a member of the Conservative Party. Hello.
Hello,
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you, Edward?
Fine, thank you. Yourself?
Very well, good.
Thank you for coming on today.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, sure. The first thing I wanted to ask you, by the way, is you've just been elected Mayor of London. Hypothetically, this is a hypothetical scenario. You've been elected as Mayor of London. You just entered City Hall and are getting used to your surroundings. What is the first major policy that you work on and why?
To be honest with you, one of the things that really concerns me, and I've been going all over London to the different boroughs and hearing about all of this corruption that exists and corruption coming from City Hall and the councils. And I think it's so important that we restructure City Hall to make sure we get rid of the corruption, to make sure we actually ensure the taxpayers that they have a solid mayor with great leadership that is going to eliminate the corruption that's going on, because a lot of lives are being attacked all over London, and it's really unacceptable, the stories I've been hearing. It's very also important that, as mayor now, we have to look at COVID recovery. Our people in London have suffered greatly during this pandemic, so that obviously is greatly on my agenda as well.
What sort of corruption in City Hall, then, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's been reported widely, for example, that the current mayor has put a lot of his mates, especially within TfL, high executives, and they're all earning 150,000 plus. The media reports it as they call them pen pushers. They don't actually do anything. And last year, in the last quarter, he paid them bonuses of up to 8 million.
Mhm.
So this is deeply concerning for me, and these are things which really need to be addressed. There's a lot of positions there that shouldn't be there. He's hired probably over 500 people, and there's questions on what they're actually doing. There's been fake departments that have been set up just to tick boxes. I know people that work within some of those departments, and they tell me they actually don't do anything. It literally has just been set up to tick a box. So these are things that we really need to address as a priority.
So, out of all these sort of fake departments, as you say, what would be the first ones you would get rid of, so to speak, if you don't mind me asking?
I obviously have to go in there and do a full analysis of what the situation is, what departments have been set up and actually aren't actually doing anything. So it has to be a complete analysis.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find out sort of about all of this? Is it just mainly from inside stuff or media stuff, like you said?
It's a mixture, actually. Obviously, some of the stuff is widely reported in the media, but I have had people, you can call them whistleblowers, working within TfL that have come forward and let me know what's going on. Other people have come forward and telling me of harassment, bullying, bribes, councils taking bribes, councillors in some of the boroughs. So there's lots of things that we need to put a stop to.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that, say, this hasn't been, I guess, a major item in the current, mayoral agenda? For the reason might be obvious. Like, why do you think this hasn't been sort of like a bigger scandal? Maybe, I suppose.
Because the fact of it is, the media is owned by two political parties, one being Labour, one being Conservative. So the media are dictated to, and they listen.
Mm-hmm. And funnily enough, that leads me on to my next question. If I'm not mistaken, you used to be a Conservative Party member. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, I did. I've also voted Labour in the past. I voted both Labour and Conservative. And to be honest with you, I like to vote what's right for the country at the time. Mm-hmm. I don't have any political allegiance. I'm non-partisan, and that's why I'm running as an independent.
Mm-hmm. The main thing I wanted to ask you about that is that why did you essentially leave the Conservative Party, and what could you offer Conservative-minded London voters that say the Conservative Party candidate Sean Bailey can't?
I left because I saw the level of corruption inside the party, and it really made me understand that political parties are very corrupt. Labour Party isn't a political party anymore, they're a gang, because the residents I've talked to all over London are being intimidated, threatened, and bullied by Labour members and councillor members, and nothing is being done, nothing is being investigated. And then again, with Conservatives, it's what we've seen with the COVID pandemic scandal is contracts have been awarded to family and friends. So, someone who's doing completely could be a pub owner and have received £1 billion contract to do PPE. So this is just unacceptable. This isn't democracy. So what I would say to any Conservative members is it's so important. I know Sean myself, and even the Conservative Party have lost trust in their own candidate. It was voted that he was the worst candidate in history representing them. So I know many Conservative voters actually have been in contact with me, and they align with my policies. They actually like my policies. So I will be releasing my manifesto tomorrow. So I asked them, go to my manifesto, have a read, and you'll see it is aligned with a vision for London, which will actually benefit the people of London.
Do you think you could do perhaps better, say, than Mr. Bailey himself in terms of like votes, given that London is a very Labour-friendly city?
Absolutely. I know I have the confidence I can definitely do a lot better than Bailey as the next mayor of London. And that's because I've got a lot of experience. I've got a lot of experience that will help me get that job done, which means business experience. Also, I've been working in volunteering community for over 20 years, so I'm really at the grassroots to understand the problems. Now, Bailey actually was on the committee with Cameron's administration and played a big part of closing all those youth centres. So he claims to be a youth worker for 20 years, but never says what he was doing. But he played part to close those youth centres, which has caused the problems that we're seeing now in society. So yes, absolutely, I have full confidence I will deliver a much better mayorship than Bailey.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about sort of like Labour being equivalent of a gang earlier. Was that reference to sort of like momentum or something like that, or is it just a general sort of thesis?
I've been speaking to the members of the public, and now Labour, they actually don't have that stronghold anymore. Now, it's quite entertaining that Labour is issuing articles. You're seeing articles that says Khan's got a lead, Khan's going to be the first mayor to win in the first round. And it's actually quite entertaining because those articles are actually being written by Labour themselves. They're press releases from Labour. And of course, the media are printing them, even though they're fake news, it's non-factual. Now, I'm actually out there in the community talking daily with Labour voters, and they don't want to vote for him. They can't stand him. They are so disappointed in Khan, and they want him out. And I'm actually winning a lot of Labour voters right now because they don't want to vote for Labour, and they're definitely not going to vote Tory. So they're looking at all the other candidates and say, you're definitely the most credible candidate out there, and you're independent. We don't want parties anymore. So it's real time for change now.
Mm-hmm. And when you talk to, say, these former Labour voters or maybe former like Sadiq Khan voters, what sort of the main issues they bring up that drag you more to you as opposed to him, for example?
Because he's let them down. So, for example, last Monday I was in Tooting, which is his stronghold. He has killed Tooting High Street. The businesses are suffering, and they're now getting less, 50% trade, less. And they're calling to him to come and talk to them. And guess what? He's not coming. He's ignoring them. But I'm there talking to them. Now, it was probably a month ago, there were some residents who actually saw Sadiq, and they peacefully went to him, trying to ask him some questions. He ran into a coffee shop, hiding from them. Now, when he realized that they weren't leaving, he then came outside. His security were keeping the people at bay. There wasn't many people. Even one of them was a cyclist, who, and he's quite pro-cyclist, peacefully trying to say, please, Sadiq, please, can you talk to us? Please, can you talk to us? He ran off and dumped into his range. Is that the mayor of London? So you can imagine voters are so fed up when this actual supposed mayor of London won't even speak to them. People just want to be listened to. I've been to, I think, over 10 boroughs just in the last week. And one thing that resonates is, thank you for coming to listen to us, because nobody's listening to us.
Hmm. And yeah, the next thing I wanted to ask, speaking on that subject matter, is what made you decide to get into politics in the first place, and yeah, in particular, run for this position?
Well, as you know, the pandemic hit last year. Mayoral elections were still going ahead. However, our Prime Minister, he delayed them last year, March. So obviously, I had no intention of running. And then in April, I realized there's no way Sean can beat Khan. It's impossible. People aren't resonating with him. Even last year, the party in February accepted that he wasn't going to win. So I actually felt a moral obligation to stand because I cannot have London suffer under Khan again. He has destroyed London, and any more years with him will just put a nail in the coffin for London.
Mhm. And what do you think then he has, according to just general polling, like some of these leads that he has in terms of like in some of his competitors? Is it just like press releases
Again,
or something like that?
those press releases are coming from the Labour Party. If you actually go on the streets and talk to the people, Khan is not doing well. And that's a campaign strategy that Labour's doing. They're feeding fake news there to make people feel, oh, okay, then if he's got the lead, then there's no point. But it's not true. He has not got the lead. They're just depending on London being Labour. But what they are not reporting is those same voters are not going to support him. Of course, he may have some hard voters, but a lot of those voters that I've been speaking to, they've lost all faith in him.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this might be one of these cases whereby the polling in terms of like what's going on the ground and say what actually goes down at the election will be two separate things, like they have been in some elections recently?
Absolutely, because the polling, they only focus on political parties. They don't actually look at any other candidates because they can't. There's actually no real way to measure polling. So that's why I actually don't pay any attention to the polling, because it's obscure. There's no way to actually measure that. So they just focus on a political party's stronghold in the area, but not actually if people are going to be voting for that individual.
Mm-hmm. And what's been your most surprising reaction in terms of like the support you've gotten when campaigning? You've talked about, say, getting some Labour voters, former Labour voters. Like, have there been any specific areas, like Labour strongholds, for example, where you've been surprised at the support you've got?
Definitely Tooting, definitely Tower Hamlets, Waltham Forest, 100%. These are all strong Labour areas. Enfield, Haringey. So it's quite interesting in these strong Labour areas that they're actually not voting for them. And I'm on the ground talking to the people. So it's not shocking because it's echoing all over London. So that's why when I'm visiting all these boroughs and talking to these voters that are lifetime Labour voters, but they're so angered by Khan that they will not vote for Labour in this upcoming election.
Mm-hmm. Do you think like Khan will lose, like, even if, you know, do you think Khan will lose anyway this mayoral election, even if, yeah, regardless of whatever the outcome is, he will lose it anyway?
I do feel pretty confident he's going to get a shock in the polls when actually the voting happens, because he's actually going to see the damage that he has caused.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this might be sort of like a more broader malaise of the Labour Party as we've seen in the last few elections as well? Is it just like a combination of that, or is it just personal sort of like animosity towards Khan's tenure, do you think?
It's a mixture of both. A lot of people are ashamed of how Labour's been handled. And I'm not, honestly, Labour is a gang. They're not a political party. What kind of party has their councillors actively threatening, intimidating people, and even party members? The stories I'm hearing are horrific. Now, I know someone who lives in Limehouse. They told me what happens on election day is you have these Labour goons, and they line up on the streets all the way onto the polling stations, and they're in the streets forcibly intimidating voters, saying you have to vote Labour, you have to vote Labour. And he said it's a scary affair to go and actually vote, because the Labour goons come out and they really intimidate you and scare you on the streets. So this sounds more like a gang. It doesn't sound like a political party. And when I speak to people, they're scared for their lives. Some of them cannot go on video. I've been actively going around London talking about these ridiculous LTNs, and they're too scared to go on camera because they're saying my family's been threatened. They show up outside my door. they follow me. This is a Labour Party. Now, Keir Starmer, what are you doing? Get your house in order. Why are you allowing this to happen?
The main now I want to focus more on your manifesto, if I may. One of the first things I noticed is that you talk about like bringing London out of the, when the COVID lockdown restrictions end. How do you plan on doing that into making London into a stronger economy again, especially considering both the negative growth and unemployment increases in recent times?
Absolutely. And a lot of that has happened because we haven't had any leadership. I will really be focusing on a solid COVID recovery plan, which will be priority to bring investment back into London. We need a lifeline. We need to bring that investment back. And I'll be focusing on a Commonwealth group of nations. I've been speaking with many investors abroad who are ready to invest into London. So yes, Brexit has happened, and that's why we need to focus on other markets. And it's a natural alliance with the Commonwealth. So that will definitely be bringing a lot of more jobs into our economy, more opportunities for people. We need to also address mental well-being, especially what's happened during the pandemic. I want to offer free online counselling available for people because that's something that people suffer with. If they have any issues, they go to their GP, and all the GPs do is drug them up. They give them antidepressants, tell them to come back in 3 months, increase the dosage. So we need to stop that drug culture and actually give people the help that they need. Suicides have gone up, so we need to definitely address that as a priority. We need to give hospitality a lifeline, because as you know, that has been an industry that has greatly been affected. We need to be intelligent with using office spaces now. I will be doing things like free office space for startups. We really need to encourage entrepreneurship. So a part of my COVID recovery plan will be also giving women grants for business to encourage them to become entrepreneurs. So there's definitely a lot on my agenda, especially with keeping London open, using testing, PCR testing. You get PCR testing availability, which gives results back within up to 40 minutes. Now, the difference between a rapid test and PCR test, a rapid test will only measure very high levels of COVID, but PCR will measure very low levels. Now, what the government is doing is they're focusing on rapid tests. So, for example, if you let's say you had COVID and you were contagious, but it was low levels, and you received a rapid test and you went to a stadium, you actually would be infecting other people. Now, if you received a PCR test and it would immediately tell you you actually do have COVID, you would do the sensible thing and go and isolate. So that's the difference of having the right leadership, is making sure we put the right test available for the public to reopen London.
And one thing I also wanted to note on that is that there's been Chris Whitty announced a few months ago that during the winter, just in case there's another COVID resurgence, they might be considering bringing back some of these restrictions. What I've read is according to the Telegraph. How will you as mayor sort of like deal with potential challenges like that? Because even though that Boris says it's irreversible, but then you have Chris Whitty saying these sort of things. How would you sort of deal with if restrictions are placed back in on a nationwide level? How would you deal with that?
If we can prove, once I become mayor, we can actually prove that our PCR testing is working and we are able to make certificates available and give access. So, for example, I actually announced all of this probably a month and a half, 2 months before the government made this announcement about these certificates. So I wonder where they got the idea from. But the idea is, if we can put PCR testing available and it works and we give certificates, so people have a certificate valid for 3-4 days and they can access gyms, restaurants, stadiums, theatres, and the system's working and we're able to maintain COVID being kept at low levels, there's no reason why we should have to go into lockdown. If the government makes grave mistakes like it has been doing, and then they reopen all the international travel and people start traveling, people are coming and then bringing the infection, then yes, that's mistakes that the government are going to be doing. So I'm thankful right now they've obviously not allowing that international travel, because we don't want to bring new variants in. We need to make sure we reopen our economy so we can get life back to normal. If you look at New Zealand and Australia, they're living very normal lives. Their economy is functioning. People are able to live normal lives. Freelancers, actors, musicians, they're not suffering. So I think we need to put UK as a priority, from government. That's what they need to be thinking, that the citizens here are a priority and we need to get their lives back to normal. But we can't keep jumping in and out of lockdowns. So there needs to be the right leadership. And the current mayor has zero leadership when it's been during this pandemic.
And speaking of that sort of thing, one other thing you note is that you talk about making London safe again. How would you do that, especially given the increases in crime which have happened, which have included, if I'm not mistaken, 1 month during Khan's tenure where London had a higher murder rate than the city of New York for the first time in recorded history?
It's very simple. He has closed over 38 police stations in London. Now, I actually went and visited every borough to visit every police station, and I was shocked and horrified. In places like Dagenham and Ilford, where knife crime has been high, their police stations are closed. There's actually no police stations there anymore. So we need to definitely reopen the police stations, especially in communities that need it most. I will be recruiting 8,500 more police, and 1,000 of that will be dedicated to address hate crime, which has gone up substantially. We will be definitely addressing the issue of knife crime. I will be opening youth academies across London, and these youth academies will be free from the age from 8 to 21, and it will be targeting performing arts, creative studios, filmmaking, coding academies, and sporting. So we have let youth down. Youth have been let down because there's no opportunities for them. If we can provide youth those opportunities to do activities away from crime, it's going to give them an opportunity again. We just need to invest in our youth, and you're going to see crime reduce significantly. We need to have a mayor that knows what they're doing and works with the police, doesn't work against the police, because if anything Khan has done, he's divided community and police, and we need to see that relationship, that alliance established again.
What do you think that the current mayor, has allowed sort of like police stations to be closed, this sort of thing, given that it's on his tenure, and even though he often blames austerity and stuff like that, it's still his money that he can use to, he's still in control of the finances. Why do you think he does this sort of thing?
He spent money in all the wrong places, and he can't take accountability. When something doesn't look right on him, he just blames the government. But the truth is, he needs to blame himself. He closed those police stations to get money to sell the assets, because they were assets. So he sold them to get the money because he spent money in ridiculous places, like hiring his friends. Interesting enough, I told you whistleblowers, that I found out within TfL, hundreds of millions of pounds has gone into shelved projects. So they hire urban planners, architects, consultants, and they look at these plans on paper, and then it just gets put on a shelf, and hundreds of millions has gone into that. That could have repaired Hammersmith Bridge. So we need to get rid of this mayor so we can have money spent in the right places, so we can save money. And I'm not looking at 19 billion as the budget. I'm actually bringing in new initiatives to generate more revenue for London, so we actually have more money to put to where it's needed. So, for example, that's why I'll be making London Tech London, the largest tech city in the world. Silicon Valley is not a city, it's a hub, but it produced its output in 2019 was 275 billion. So just imagine London being the largest tech city in the world, the center of excellence, an ecosystem with tech development. We will generate a lot of revenues, inviting the greatest minds to come and invest in London.
And one other thing I wanted to ask this subject is would one of your plans involve, say, bringing back sort of more preventative patrolative policing on the streets of London? And this is something that has also been discussed in the recent tragic case of Sarah Everend. If I'm getting the name wrong, I apologize.
Absolutely. It has highlighted major concerns of people being scared. I was in Enfield just the day before yesterday, and I was talking to a group in the community, and the Enfield Council, they've reduced the street lighting, they've dimmed it significantly, so people are feeling unsafe. One, because of the LTN, so it's reduced traffic, so the roads are pretty much dead, and then the dim street lighting. So one of the men, and he was quite, a large, tall man, he said he's scared of walking in the street at night. He walks in the middle of the road because he's too scared to walk on a pavement. So we really need to address the street lighting, more cameras. I believe it was Barnet, the other day before yesterday, a woman was walking her dog in the morning. And again, these LTNs have created more crime. A man approached her and said, "I hate dogs." And then he started kicking her and her dog.
Right.
Now, there was no cars, no cyclists, nothing. So she was screaming and crying. Thankfully, a neighbor in one of the houses heard something and he came running outside to help her. So when, you've got reduced police presence, you've got, reduced people on the roads, this is making people unsafe. In Islington, there's problems where crime has gone up because the mopeds know the police can go and can't go, and they know they can't get through the bollards anymore. So they go and attack people, and then that's their escape route, and the police can't follow them. So absolutely, we really need to look at preventative ways of managing London, and we are really letting our residents down at the moment.
As a victim of moped gangs in London myself, I understand what's going on there. The next thing I wanted to ask you, in terms of your manifesto, is about making London affordable again. How would you do that, especially for people like me in my age range of early 20s who find house buying, let alone and renting, very difficult?
Well, let's face it, you're being priced out of London. It's virtually impossible for anyone in your generation or even in anyone's generation now to buy a property in London. It's not affordable. And some of the councils have denied so many planning permissions for affordable housing. So we really need to address that. We need to make sure affordable housing projects are approved. And I will definitely be making sure any investors who aren't residents of London will not be allowed to buy affordable housing. It will only be for the actual residents of London. So that's very important, because we've been having investors that come and buy 20 units in the building, don't live there. They either keep them vacant or just put them up for rent. So that's one definitely thing we have to make sure we address. I will be introducing a revolutionary kind of buy-to-let scheme where monthly rents will contribute to build equity back into that property. That's not available right now. So you see schemes where people can put £50,000 down or 100,000 and they get a small percentage of equity, but then they still need to pay monthly rent, but they get no equity back. So it's about introducing sensible schemes that work, ensuring that affordable housing is not priced at 450,000. It needs to be something reasonable from 125 or 150. Another thing, not only about buying, renters. It's difficult for people now to even rent because people on low incomes. And when they go to rent, they need to have enough of a deposit. It could sometimes be 2 months or 6 weeks. Because of COVID pandemic, we're seeing estate agents asking for more. So it's available on the market, but it's not widely used by estate agents. It's called zero deposit schemes, where it's backed up by insurance. So I want to make sure estate agents are offering that to tenants, so they can actually rent a property. They pay just 1 week's rent for the insurance, but they don't need to put down 2-3 months deposit. And that's really going to help people, because I know people have become homeless because they couldn't pay rent for the deposit. The deposit was the most important thing. So we really need to ensure that we're making London affordable for people. For tenants on low incomes below the age of 25, they will be exempt from council tax. I really want to put money back into people's pockets.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about, like, say, all this investment that's coming in from people who don't live in London. And what would you do essentially about the money that's already in there from, say, oligarchs from Russia, Qatar, China, and some in the Gulf, for example? What would you do about the property that's there now that's owned by these oligarchs? Would you sort of like tax it to sort of like encourage it to at least put people in there as opposed to leave them empty, for example?
They're buying luxury apartments, so that's not really affordable anyway. They're buying these penthouses, 20 million, 15 million, 10 million. So my focus is affordable housing. A lot of investors with affordable projects, they end up buying a substantial amount of units and re-rent them out for investment purposes. That's the stuff that we need to stop. London is we're definitely always going to welcome investors if they know they're putting money in the luxury things. I really want to encourage more commercial buying for investors from these areas, because we've got a lot of commercial assets. So we need to encourage more of that. But definitely I'm not focused on a luxury housing market. It's about affordable housing for real life Londoners who really are struggling.
What does an eco village look like, as you say in your manifesto, and how will that benefit, how in the way in solving this crisis?
So my eco village is to eradicate rough sleeping with homelessness. And what we will be doing in eco villages, because we'll put different villages across London, you've seen shipping containers. We'll be converting shipping containers into self-contained one-bedroom apartments with shower, bathroom facilities. And this will be a way to actually eradicate rough sleeping, so we don't get any more rough sleepers. We can put them into the eco village and then help them back onto their feet to get back into employment. I'll be also opening hygiene centres across London. I work with the homeless charities quite a lot all over London, and some of the things I see is just basic hygiene needs. So there's nowhere for them really to wash, shower, wash their clothes. Maybe a couple of churches have these facilities. So if we really need to make, even a GP, if you don't have an address, you don't have access to a GP. And unfortunately, a lot of them have medical needs. It could be diabetes because they have a poor diet. So we need to really try and help these needs. So with these eco villages, we'll also be offering on-site jobs as well, encouraging homelessness to eradicate. You have within the homeless community, I like to call them the streetwise, because they've been living on the streets for a substantial amount of years. It's now become a way of living for them. It's a choice of life. So I want to actually work with them, and instead of them having to beg on the streets, work with the council. So for example, environment's very big for me. So with the environment policies I have with the streetwise community, what we'll be doing is encouraging them, for example, collecting the plastics within the borough, and whatever they collect they can take to the councils at the end of the day and get paid for it. Teaching them gardening to obviously help with the parks and things, because a lot of people I speak to, they don't want to sit there begging. They want to feel useful, they want to feel part of society, but we're not giving them those opportunities. So I really want to really help them get back into work and let them know that they are valued.
Mm-hmm. On the next point, tell me more about your plan to put London on par with Silicon Valley in terms of technological and digital opportunities, and explain how that will benefit ordinary Londoners.
It's going to benefit definitely ordinary Londoners, because it's going to bring a lot more job opportunities. I will be opening free coding academies. These free coding academies for anyone, no matter what your age is. If you want to learn front end, back end, full stack development, we're going to help teach you those skills. So that way we can actually build talent force. We'll be obviously then inviting many investment companies who want to do tech development. We'll become the center of excellence in tech. And that will really go for our carbon-free future that we want. So for example, electric cars. The tech's really not that great right now. I was speaking to someone that has a hybrid Mercedes, and they told me that they've had it 5 years and the electric battery is not charging anymore. So they went to Mercedes, and Mercedes said, oh, sorry, your battery is only under warranty for 3.5 years. So they said, oh, okay, so how much to replace it? Now the car now is only worth, I think, up to 12,000. They were quoted £7,000 to replace the battery. Now, after 5 years of having a car, even after 3.5 years, that model isn't going to work for Londoners. So we need to make sure we have the tech in electric cars so people can go electric with that vision. We need to make sure we're the center for development of robotics, for gaming, for artificial intelligence. We need to make sure that tech doesn't alienate society. It helps our high streets. So using tech the right way, we really can be at the forefront of development. So it really excites me to think what Tech London will do, even with things like broadband coverage. I believe we're going to have 12% coverage across London. And if you look at some of our counterparts in Asia, where they have up to 90% coverage, we're doing quite bad.
And would this mainly be about encouraging new tech startups or encouraging, say, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, and all the rest of them to start up there? Is it mainly about new businesses or encouraging more jobs for already existing companies?
It's both. We need to work in partnership with the private sector to really deliver Tech London. That will be working with the giants, but of course, it will be empowering the new startups and having grants available as well, because we want to encourage advancement and new technologies within. So that means empowering new startups as well. So it goes hand in hand. You have to do it together.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of like it being, just some what sort of like main business sectors would it focus on? Would it be like social media, gaming? You say it's a bit of all of that, but what would be the sort of the main focus? Would the main focus be the broadband, for example, that you talked about, like getting more coverage across London?
It goes, all of it's critical. So it's not going to be a Tech London only focused on this. When we're talking about being largest tech city in the world, obviously then we need to have many different departments focusing, whether it's in app and gaming, whether it's in robotics, whether it's in sustainable energy tech. So yes, it has to be a number of different departments.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think like broadband coverage across London is not as high as, say, other countries? South Korea comes to mind, for example.
Yes, South Korea is excellent. I just feel we haven't had the right leadership. They neglected what we need in London. They've been focused on other things, and I really see the problems that we have. So that's why it's time to actually have a leader that will put London on a map a lot more than what we've had.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if we don't actually start to seize the moment on this, if so to speak, that we'll be left behind in comparison again with Silicon Valley or many of the countries in Southeast Asia on this?
Absolutely, and we're positioned perfectly geographically, so that's why we need to do it now. It's more important than ever we jump on this, because we already are far behind, so we need to play catch up, and then dominate. So it's very unfortunate that successive mayors haven't focused on this. It's only recently, probably in the last 2 weeks, the government announced, oh yes, let's focus on tech. I've been screaming and shouting about it for quite some time now, because we really need to catch up. We need to make sure London plays its role on the playing field. We need to be ahead of other countries, what they've done, but we want to invite the greatest minds here.
Why do you think the government and also successive mayors have not been as interested in tech as, say, other things? Is it because, do you think many of them are not as tech savvy, for example, about all this stuff, or is it just that they feel that they have other priorities, whether that thought is actually beneficial or not?
Simple answer. They've been too busy playing political games with each other, but they're not actually doing the best for London, and that's why we are fed up of the politicians and the political parties, and that's why we need an independent mayor that's actually going to address the problems for London and actually do things and represent the people. The political parties, all they do is argue amongst each other. They never agree on anything, and they've wasted years and years of doing this, and people are fed up now.
Okay. I hope you don't mind me asking a specific question, but how many jobs would you assume these sort of schemes would create? Just, it doesn't have to be like a specific number, just like, how many would you think it would create if it was to take off?
It's going to create thousands of jobs just in the short term, because we really want to build that workforce. We'll be bringing companies that will be hiring more, individuals here. So just imagine, I've been speaking to a lot of tech companies from all over the world. They're ready. They want to come and see this. Even companies who are based here, they're willing to put money into Tech London from the private sector. So definitely we're going to see thousands of jobs being created, but also as a responsible mayor, once we set up Tech London and it's working and it's actually creating and building jobs, I want to help other mayors in other cities to help them also establish something similar. So the UK can really get the forefront of tech advancement.
Mm-hmm. Are many of these business leaders as frustrated as you are about the fact that they are not really been given the proverbial key, so to speak, in order to start all this up?
Absolutely, and that's why I'm gaining a lot of support, especially within the private sector, because they find it refreshing finally a mayor that speaks business and understands that London is not where it needs to be, and someone that's driving that change forward.
Mm-hmm. And also, the next question I wanted to ask you was, how will you improve the current public service network, public transport network, I should say, sorry, as it currently stands in London, in particular TfL and the black cab service, of which you specify on your website?
Number one, the black cab service, they've really been done so bad by TfL, by Mayor Khan, and also the government. This pandemic has been extremely difficult for them because they haven't actually been properly integrated into TfL. They weren't provided the grants, the support, the promotion. It's a fact. The black cabs are definitely the safest transport right now, public transport right now, because of the shielding that they already have in place. So why did the NHS give the contract to Uber? Should have gone to the black cabs, because definitely they are a lot safer. I want to definitely see the black cabs integrated into the system. I want to introduce TfL app where passengers like yourself and I can actually go on a TfL app and book. Sorry, it's my dogs.
No, that's fine.
They can book journeys without having to pay ridiculous commissions on their, the journeys. And also with TfL, we need to make TfL affordable. It's not affordable right now. So we need to make sure that it is affordable for passengers, introducing a new ticketing system. I want to start generating revenue. It's untapped, the amount of revenue we can generate through advertising, through sponsorships. So it's really having a mayor that will actually turn TfL around, make it profitable. That's really key. And like I said earlier, getting rid of those pen pushers who are earning ridiculous salaries on the executive level, so we can actually put that money back into people's pockets.
Mm-hmm. One thing on this is do you agree then with the recent court decisions about Uber being banned from London in terms of the taxi service in order not to undercut black cabs?
Now, it's a complete mess and it goes straight into corruption. Let's not get into that. But we need to make sure there's a cap on private hire licenses that are being offered right now. There's really no proper caps. In 2019, it was reported we had 102,000 cab services. Almost 80,000 of those were reported to be Uber. So it's not needed, and that's the congestion and traffic that we're seeing in the street. So I do want to put caps on licenses, and especially within Zone 1, the amount of private hire vehicles that we're seeing within Zone 1, it's actually been done in places like Monaco, and it works. So I really will restrict the amount of private hire, because right now anyone can just jump in a car and be a private hire taxi.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of your TfL reforms, what will be the main sort of initiatives you might push for? And admittedly, it's a bit more of a personal question, given that I have family who work on TfL.
Who has family?
Me, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said I did.
No.
I want to make sure that the staff are protected and they're offered, especially for mental well-being. I've been hearing from TfL workers who are doing sometimes insane long shifts, and they're tired, they're exhausted. So we really need to address shift working and mental well-being so they feel protected by the organization, number one. And we also need to make sure that their working rights are protected as well. I've been speaking to bus drivers, I've been speaking to people working within the underground system, and hearing some things that do concern me. So I really want to put people at the forefront. The workers, they're day in, day out, they're there doing the job. And instead of putting money into the pockets of those executives, I think it can go a lot further going to helping and making the benefits better for the actual key workers.
Mm-hmm. And given that Sadiq Khan, during his tenure, has TfL's gone bankrupt under his tenure, what would you do to recover TfL from being bankrupt and put it back in the green again? I think is the right phrase.
Well, what we need to do, like I said, is additional revenue schemes. So that's something that I really will be focusing on with the advertising and sponsorships, because we can really capitalize on that and really generate money. So we're not really tapped into that right now. It's been quite poor level. We need to make it profitable, absolutely, because then we can improve it. And again, going with the vision where we want to go green, we can then obviously really focus on the tech for the train system and the buses, so we can work towards that reality of 2030 or 2050 where it's meant to be zero emissions. So yeah, absolutely, it's about raising revenues.
Mm-hmm. Do you think
and not through making ticket prices higher.
Mm-hmm.
That's making people not use the public transport.
Would one initiative you might do in terms of like public transport, bringing on driverless cars in line with the tech city stuff you're talking about, like prioritize those a bit more?
No, I don't. I'm not such a fan of completely driverless, because we've seen major train accidents happen and things. So I think we're always going to need to have that human touch as well, because sometimes tech can go wrong. And these are people's lives, so you can't play Jeopardy like that with people's lives. So, I value people, and I don't want robots to replace people.
Here. Would you try and limit or ban maybe then like driverless or automated transport then, whether it be on the tube network or just driving in general then from there?
Well, we obviously have to see the lines, what's working, what's not working. So, for example, the DLR, that's working, but that's been set up to work like that. So that's why those lines work like that. But then if you look at the underground, that's very sophisticated. I mean, that goes back a few hundred years. They're very old systems. So, you have to look at it intelligently, and most safety first at the end of the day. So you have to do a full analysis to see, our lives going to be put at risk? Again, I think there's nothing like the human touch. When we're stuck in a tube, it's so comforting to hear that voice from that driver that's telling you, explaining the situation. We're so sorry, we're stuck in a tunnel, there's a red light. Sometimes you get some great humor that goes with that. So I don't want to lose that, because that's what makes London what it is.
Mm-hmm. And would one aspect to this, would you in terms of like the the green vision that you have, would you continue to convert sort of like in terms of transport, would you convert already existing taxis and trains to make them more eco-friendly, or and buses as well, or would you just like replace them with more eco-friendly ones? Is it like, would you convert or replace?
Well, that's really interesting, because I've been understanding some that have been converted to charge them, they actually use diesel. So it kind of defeats what's going on there. Some actually are using hydro technology, and they're using water and things. So that's why, we want to create Tech London, so we can actually invest in looking at the best sustainable way going forward. So that's also, while we'll have that special department dedicated to understanding the technologies, or creating new technologies, so we can actually do it right properly, not put things and then we realize, oh, actually this doesn't work. We need to get it right, because at the end of the day, it's not that we just waste money. Money shouldn't be wasted. It needs to be done properly, so then it works for that whole lifetime.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about this is that you talk about you'll be introducing 100 days of free travel across London. How will that work, and how will you pay for it to sort of like cover the sort of how would you be able to pay for it? What would you do in order to cover that, so to speak?
Well, firstly, obviously, we have seen such reduced numbers on the public transport system. And it's really introducing those 100 days is really to help the businesses, because we need to get people back into London, back into the city, back into the main areas, to encourage them to get back out and start shopping as well, because the businesses frankly need it. And people have really suffered, working from home, lost their jobs. So I really want to encourage people to get out there, obviously safety first with this pandemic. Thankfully, the vaccine program has rolled out and it's been very successful. So probably by July, we all should have received the first dose, hopefully. So that's obviously going to help with containing the virus. But we really need to encourage people to get back into London so they feel safe, they feel excited again, and they help the businesses that have really suffered, that depend on the foot flow. When you walk around London and you see how many businesses have been affected, how many high street shops have been closed, they're fighting for survival right now. How is it going to be funded at the end of the day? Like I said, there's been so much mismanagement with the current funds. They've been spent in all the wrong places. So it's really, again, like I said earlier, doing a restructure, not only on City Hall, but on the budgets, to make sure we don't waste money anymore. Money goes to the right places. And again, like I said, number one, I will be focusing on generating revenue through advertising and sponsorships. Private companies are ready because they want to reach their target audiences. So you're going to see an influx of businesses wanting to reach target audience. Now, if we can get people back on the public transport, it's going to be a win-win situation for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And you also talk about like how to restore the community's confidence in the transport system. Two brief things on this. One, how much do you worry that due to the pandemic anyway, a lot of the customers of TfL are not gonna, and taxis and buses or whatever, are not gonna necessarily come back in a hurry? And what other initiatives would you take beyond the 100 days of free travel in order to increase the confidence of people to go back on those networks after this pandemic is over?
Well, I think the 100 days is definitely going to encourage a lot of people to go on there. For example, I would like to encourage special initiatives on certain days, certain times in the day, when it would be free to go to Oxford Street, when it would be free to go to certain key areas where they're shopping high streets, to encourage people to help those high streets survive. It's so sad when you hear Debenhams has closed, because that has, since I was a child, Debenhams has been there. So the high street shops are dying. So they really need that lifeline. They need people to get back out there. So I definitely will be looking at how we're doing the ticketing system. I will be looking at people on low incomes, like in hospitality. So for example, they do very early shifts. So they can start quite early in the morning, finish quite late at night. So for them, they will be benefiting from free transport, because obviously they're on lower incomes, they're in hospitality. We really need to provide a lifeline for the hospitality sector right now. So yes, I will be completely revamping the way systems are done, the way ticketing is done. So we need to encourage people to have faith again in the system.
And also on that, how do you feel about the fact that one of the more important things about the networks like that is the fact that whenever, say, maybe like people go on strike in those sectors, it often, like, say, undermines sort of the way it works and so on and so forth. As mayor, how would you deal with sort of like the major strikes? Because there has been controversy in the past of, like, not just Khan but Johnson as well, in terms of like handling these strikes. Like, how would you handle, like, say, an RMT strike as a London mayor?
You need to actually have I would say you need to have ongoing dialogue with the unions to find out what the problems are before they go on strike. So that's something that's so important. Have regular meetings with the unions so you can actually address problems before it escalates to that point. I want to be a mayor that's accessible and talks to the people to address their concerns. So that's a priority, and we haven't seen that with past leadership. It escalates to such a problem, and then obviously strikes happen.
Why do you think it does do that? Is it just because they're not as particularly interested, or that then, say the strikes don't affect them as much, so they're not as interested in solving them, for example? Do you think that might have something to do with it?
So I think it's all about leadership. I think, like I said, the political parties are too busy playing political games with themselves, but they actually have lost sight of the problems going on in London. And that's why crime's out of control. Knife crime, youth have nothing to do. I mean, there's so many problems going on, but no mayor actually has done anything about these things. And we really need a mayor now that's going to come in, stop playing the blaming game, and just get the job done.
Mm-hmm. And also, one of the last things I wanted to ask you, I hope you don't mind, and forgive me for playing devil's advocate slightly here, is like, if you don't win this position, what would you plan for your political future? Would you run for this position again, or what would you consider doing in the future, in terms of, like, if you don't win this position?
I don't think, I haven't thought that. I've actually focused on winning this. So if I don't, then let's have another call.
Fair enough. And Yeah, also in other sort of stuff, you also talk about, like, say, eco policies and stuff like that. Like, what would be the main initiative in order to make London more eco-friendly and so on, if you don't mind me asking?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things I will be doing, sorry, one of the things I, it's my dog.
I have
One
one
of
as
the
well, it's
things,
fine.
oh yeah, I have two. They definitely keep me entertained. But one of the things I definitely want to see London cleaner and greener. And if I told you we can clean the air in London within days, that sounds great, right? So I've been speaking to the professors in Oxford and Cambridge to see how we can make these things achievable. Now, I will be introducing microalgae installations across London. Now, microalgae, it's absolutely incredible. Once installed, within days, it actually takes out all the carbon dioxide, metals, and the toxins from the air, and it converts it to oxygen. And the more the pollution, the more it grows and flourishes and keeps recycling into oxygen. So I want to make sure we have these in place all over. I will be doing something very special where there's a 10-year environmental drive, and we will be giving free training to members of the public for environmental scientists. So whether it's marine biology or plants and sciences, any member of the public can get this free training, and then they will get a certificate, and then they can actively, through their councils, go out and maintain their environment. So instead of protesting, let's actually go out and do something for environment. It will be great to get people outdoors in their families, singles, couples, whatever. Get out and actually start helping the environment and taking responsibility. So these things are really going to bring a lot of awareness, which I think is important. I'll be focusing on doing campaigns across London so people understand why recycling is so important and how the small things really do add up and make a difference. So yes, absolute environment is key on there. Climate change. My manifesto actually will be released tomorrow, and you can actually go through there and see my strong environmental policies, and I guarantee you it's stronger than any other candidate.
One of the things that the mayor tried to do was make, I think it was like Oxford Square, like a pedestrianised no road zone, but he was blocked from doing that by Westminster Council. As mayor, what sort of how would you combat those sort of challenges where you try and do these things, but a council might throw up a challenge, for example? What would you do?
Well, I'm against what he was trying to do because that was alienating disabled and elderly people who need access. It's not fair that they get dropped off at one end and then have to struggle to get halfway down the middle to the shop that they need to. And then if they, they depend on a bus or a taxi, they have to walk quite a distance to try and get one. So that was just a ludicrous idea. London, at the end of the day, it's not Amsterdam. We need to keep moving. We're a bustling city. So we can't cycle and walk everywhere. Where it's possible, people will do it. But we need to understand there's vulnerable people in our society that depend on public transport, that depend on transport. So we can't alienate the communities that are depending on using transportation. But what we need to do is encourage people to go green. But we need to have the infrastructure for charging points for people to go green and make green affordable, because right now electric cars are very expensive. So it's about doing things the proper way. You can't just decide to close roads and make all these LTNs or make things pedestrianized when it's actually alienating a big part of society.
And one other thing I wanted to ask was about the government has set sort of like the net zero target for like 2050. How would you think that they're doing at that so far? And how would you, as London mayor, sort of like one up them in a sense if you don't think they're doing very well?
Well, that's why I'm bringing Tech London, because right now I don't see how it's achievable because we're not even investing in a tech to make that happen. So through Tech London, it will actually help the government's plan because we will produce the tech to make that a reality.
And one of the last questions I wanted to ask you was, this is the title of the show, and I like to ask it to all my guests, is what would your ideal world be? This is the title of the show, so I feel it's appropriate to ask.
My ideal world?
Yes.
My ideal world would definitely be a world where we don't see human rights violations, where people are living and not feeling objected by society. We're not seeing racism happen. We're not seeing people being discriminated against, where also women are equal as well. But my ideal world for London would be London being a connected community, everyone feeling proud to be a Londoner. At the end of the day, no matter where you're from, if you live and work in London, you're a Londoner. And I want people to feel that pride. If you're invested in our city, we're invested in you. So together, I want people to be united and feel proud. And I really want us to bring London back.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for coming on, and thank you for just finish off. How, if people want to find you more about you and your campaign, just let them know how they could do it, like link your social media and so on.
Absolutely. You can go straight to the website, which is votefarah.london, or you can go to my Twitter or Instagram, which is very simple, Miss Farah London. So please, if you have any questions, I'm always there to answer questions. You can go onto my homepage of the website and you can send a WhatsApp and talk to me directly. Let's talk.
Okay, thank you very much for coming on, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you so much, Edward. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share this video, as well as subscribe to the Ed Interviews YouTube channel, and also the Ed Interviews BitChute channel, and also look at my stuff on Mixcloud as well. I have more of this content coming in, and also subscribe to my Patreon subscribe star as well for more guest requests, as well as free copies of my old books. Until then, see you next time, guys.